The following program is a co-production with EWTN and the Tim and Steph Bush School of Business and Economics of the Catholic University of America.
Hello, I'm Jay Richards from the Bush School of Business and Economics at the Catholic University of America here in Washington, D.C. Welcome to A Force for Good. In today's episode, we meet a family and a family business that started with an invention. Like most family businesses, Electric Mirror had humble beginnings. It began with a few family members working from home, but it's now a global leader in lighted mirrors and mirror television technology.
I started this with my dad, and my mom soon was forced to help out, and my brother as well, and a few friends. But really, we started this in their three-car garage.
We'd be answering the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, electric mirror, look. Jumping out of bed and answering the phone. So that was kind of a silly thing. And then it started in the garage, and then they moved it to the living room and the kitchen and the rec room, and just fascinating times.
It was pretty comical because we opened up the garage doors and I cranked up the radio to try to cover up the factory noise of making our initial product. We started off by making mirror defoggers to keep mirrors from fogging up. And we thought it was a great idea. Oddly enough, it really never did take off.
It was kind of more Jim's idea, and what would happen back then, he basically got a lot of ideas, but I designed the stuff, because I'm pretty good at mechanics and drawing and that sort of thing.
It was year after year after year of trying to promote that product and build it. And sales were really difficult at that time.
Making no money and struggling, and so we were like, hey, let's try the hotel industry, because you're not selling one at a time, you're selling 200 at a time. I'm making cold calls all day long, 200-300 calls, just, hey, do you want a mirror defoggers? And they're like, well, we're just trying to get coffee makers in all of our hotel rooms, or we're just trying to get internet. Like this was back in probably 1997, 98 maybe, and finally we knocked on the right door at the right time, and they said, hey, can you do a lighted mirror? We're like, yeah, sure we can. Young and dumb, and sure, we'll do whatever. They could, if they wanted ice, we would have sold them ice. And we said, fax is what it looks like.
And we didn't know what they were talking about, really. And they sent over some sketches, and we decided, yeah, we're gonna make this. And I wasn't sure how we were gonna get all these built and with what money. And so we needed our client to put up half the money in order to build these for them. Here we are in a garage, to give us $150,000 to build their product. And that was really our first mirror that lit up. Obviously,
you need to make money, but you don't make it at any cost. When we tell a client we'll do something for them, we do it. If we have a product that has let them down, we go out and fix it.
When we first shipped all these products to the customer, most of them got broken in transit. And literally, all the money that we'd made on the job, we had to spend to fix the product.
We try to take care of things we do.
Spent all summer fixing these products. I told my family and a really small team, I said, I think there's a future in these mirrors that light up.
And so my brother's a patent lawyer, and we just started writing patents. And from that, we evolved. We're at a big trade show in Las Vegas. The hotel came to us and said, hey, we see you can do lights in mirrors. Can you do TVs in mirrors? I said, sure we can. What does it look like?
The concept caught on. Today, electric mirror products can be found in over 100 countries around the world. It started as a humble family business in the early 1990s in a garage in Linwood, Washington. Parents, Doc and Faith, And the kids, Jim, Aaron, and Mia, were part of the effort from the very beginning. That effort has now built a company employing over 400 people, all proud of a product that is made in America.
The company's been in existence for about 20 years, and we were in the garage for about 7 years, as most startups are. I've not seen a culture anything like this. I've been in business for some 30 years, and you see businesses operating, and we use a lot of business processes like most other companies would. But here it's a little different. The family wears their faith on their sleeve, which is why I'm here. I was drawn by that. On the front of the building it says, "In God we trust." And it's really cool because we get to show the love of Christ. People receive the love. What they do with it is entirely up to them. It's just a remarkable thing. I've been here for 3.5 years, and the size of the company has at least doubled. And we responded to it really well. We moved into this new building, and it's been dramatic. We went from 52,000 feet to 125,000 feet. We were here a year, and we've already maxed out the building. So we're spending a lot of time with that growth on trying to figure out how to do it more effectively and more efficiently, and how to grow smartly rather than just at a fever pitch, which is the way it was when I first came here. I was like, I've never experienced that kind of growth in manufacturing, and this was remarkable to see. We do standard things, slightly more custom, and really amazingly custom products. And we do it through the same facility, the same equipment. They basically will tell us the details of the mirror. They want a little different size, we want a little different frame, we want something else to happen. So that's all part of it, that it's designed in engineering.
I look at our end here of, wanting to be super successful and impacting our community and culture and people, but how we carry it out is as important as the end. And so that means sometimes we gotta take a moment and care about the individual and their needs. I love going on the floor, and I've had the chance to work with our team fairly often and just say, believe it or not, this little thing that you're doing actually is really, really important. And we wanna do them well here, and we're trying to encourage everyone here. Let's do them well. Let's have fun while we're doing it. So I'm hoping this is a fun, faith-filled place to work. I think we're getting there.
You don't feel like just another number or another employee. You're vital to the company. You're important, and what you do is recognized and acknowledged. Even in the littlest way, it's still, the small things count.
It was faith, perseverance, and tenacity that kept the family and Electric Mirror on track when times were tough.
Which jobs our customers might be able to accept before the faith basically has had faith for this business when other people didn't think it was going to go anywhere. It's been, through a lot of persistence and help of God, and sometimes the things come through at the right time when you wouldn't expect them to come through.
And so we're dealing with a cash flow. And I pulled all the bosses together, and I says, hey, we have a cash flow problem. Pulled the accountants in, and I said, how much do you need? And she says, $1 million. I said, okay, we're going to believe for a miracle here. And so everybody gathered together. I said, you believe, you believe, you believe. Everybody believed. I said, okay, let's pray. The next day, $1 million came in.
The complexity of the product.
We expect that we would conduct ourselves with Christian values. We have, prayer meetings at our business. Now, not everybody attends these, but those that would like to, they're more than welcome, and they do.
We believe this company, one of the reasons why we're here is to create resources to impact the community and the culture. That's super important to us. And so maybe that's an orphanage in Africa. Maybe that's the local mission here in our area. There's so many opportunities, and I want to see companies capture just the idea that we could represent Christ in our community with our resources. That's one of the most important things we do. And sometimes it's really tough because it's a stressful job, but I love that so many of our leaders bought into that vision of, yeah, let's do great things here.
We have the finances to say, hey, here, we can do this, we can bless you here, and we can bless you there. So I think That's one of the things that we get to do, which is so fun to give. We have an orphanage that we give to in China. There's other groups in Honduras and down in Mexico. We visited some orphanages there, which is so much fun to be able to bless them. I was adopted before I was born. She actually got raped. And when she was 14, she got raped at the drive-in theater. And her mom took her in and tried to have an abortion, but she was hiding that she was pregnant from her mom for a few months. Well, in 1975, you couldn't have abortions like you can now. So they said, sorry, you're too far along. Can't have an abortion. Well, the nurse there said, well, I know a dentist, my dad, and a teacher. I'm sure they'd love to adopt your baby.
So that's the story. A beautiful young mom was raped and decided that we were worth this baby.
We, of course, are very interested in this pro-life movement. When you talk about Aaron's story and where Aaron came from, that's obviously the case, and he has a good platform for it. And the family supports that and gives toward that.
On June 30th, 2014, the Supreme Court granted a landmark victory for religious liberty. In Burwell versus Hobby Lobby stores, the court ruled that Americans do not lose their religious freedom when they open a family business. Such companies do not have to violate their faith or pay severe fines. Electric Mirror submitted an amicus brief in support of Hobby Lobby.
It was really magnificent to come into a company that was spending their own profitability on putting this amicus brief together. That's not an inexpensive and a simple undertaking. And they saw Hobby Lobby and they loved what was going on because of the pro-life stand that they were taking. It was the amicus brief that actually swayed Judge Kennedy to move his vote over to get us to the point where we would receive that victory for the pro-life movement. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. This family-run business, they're very actively involved in the business and everything that we do. The Mischel family has done something that I've not seen anywhere else. And hopefully, we can get other people to replicate this.
I think my mom really instilled in us giving. I don't think we deserve what we've been given, but we take it and we appreciate it. But, too much is given, much is expected.
We're trying to live out faith here and model that for other companies. I totally believe that's one of our missions here, is to model the idea of a kingdom business, a Christ modeled business. Doesn't mean you're a Christian to work here, but that means the company is modeling who Christ is and how he wants to live our lives and how he wants to see us transformed individually, in our families, communities, our culture. That's the basis for everything we do, right?
Electric Mirror is a great example of how a Christian family-owned business can be a success. To talk more about what it's like out there for Christian businesses, we're joined by Anthony Cannizzaro, Assistant Professor of International Business and Global Strategy at the Catholic University of America, and Max Torres, Associate Professor and Director of Management at the Catholic University of America. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
When the average person that's not in the business world thinks of corporate America, usually the vision is some massive, publicly traded company that's somehow unaccountable. But the reality, my understanding, Tony, I know you've thought some about this, that family-owned small businesses, these are still a major part of the American economy, aren't they?
It's a resounding yes. So the latest figures that I was looking at said somewhere along the lines of 2/3 of our GDP and about 3/4 of our new job creation come from family businesses.
Wow.
So they're a driver of growth in the economy.
So does this mean that those companies stay that way, or is this that essentially where the new jobs come from? They don't necessarily start from these large companies. They start with family-owned businesses, and then some of them get large, right? I mean, some fail, of course, but some also get large, right? I think Walmart is a family-owned business, and so it's not like family-owned businesses always stay small, but at least initially, these are usually kind of small startups like Electric Mirror.
I think that's absolutely correct. So even if a company decides to go public, you'll oftentimes see that the family continues to hold large positions of ownership. And we have, you already used the example of Walmart, Wegmans, all of these huge names that we've heard of are oftentimes family-owned and still highly involved with family members today.
The Washington Post used to be a family-owned company by the Meyer family, and they set up a stock structure. They went public, but they set up a structure where they held the Class A and shares, which were the voting shares, and Class B shares were sold to investors. So investors essentially were deprived of a vote on the company. There's any number of legal ways to structure this. Generally, the big divide is between a public corporation and a private corporation, but even a public corporation can be maintained by an entity. Facebook, I imagine, is mostly controlled by Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
In a sense, that's a family-owned company.
Well, so, I mean, do government laws, I mean, what's the kind of regulatory climate like in the United States? We know that there are lots of family-owned companies. The government and the legal structure, do we encourage that, discourage it, someplace in the middle?
Well, the regulatory climate is one issue. The legal climate is another, and the constitutional climate is yet another. I mean, our Constitution has provisions in it for the protection of intellectual property that have caused an explosion of intellectual property in this country. Our law, if I can tell you an anecdote, briefly, I taught a course once to lawyers from former Soviet republics. It's called The Legal Context of American Business. And they were dumbfounded at how easy it was to just go out and start doing business in the United States. In the countries they came from, you had to fill out myriad forms, bribe myriad people. There were so many impediments to forming a business. We don't have those by and large in this country. Now, the regulatory state, the part of the government that's not in the U.S. Constitution, of course, has myriad regulations, and those, yes, can definitely impede the formation, the growth, the development, the prosperity of these family-owned companies.
Well, and so in many cases, I mean, we're here in Washington, D.C., so we're surrounded by all of these massive agencies, many of which, are obviously trying to do a good job. These are not bad people. Sure, it's just that at least once companies get above a certain size, it's almost like, okay, there's sort of a carve-out in which it can often be easy to start a company and have a few employees, but then there'll be laws in which you get, say, above a certain number of employees, right? Then all of a sudden a kind of new set of regulations kicks in. Is that part of the problem?
That's the case with the Affordable Care Act, for instance. The 30 employees was the threshold for coverage. Okay. So what happened was a number of the smaller companies just said, fine, we're 29 people companies because we can't afford 30 people and to provide the health care that's mandated by this law and by these regulations.
So it essentially incentivizes companies to start small and stop, though, at 29, ironically.
Kind of large companies can pass their costs on a lot more easily than small companies can. Yeah. A lot of mom and pop shops they're wiped out by regulations. That's the kind of thing that can't exist, as well as competition and all of the things that kill businesses in any event.
Well, that's what I find inspiring about this Electric Mirror story, Tony. I mean, this is quite literally a closely held family-owned company started by a father and his two sons, and is quite explicitly Christian. I mean, they understand their mission and the company itself in terms of Christian theology and in terms of their mission. It is privately held. Many people may not know, but Electric Mirror actually signed a brief on behalf of Hobby Lobby in the famous case against Hobby Lobby that went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the court in 2014 then said, okay, privately held, closely held companies have a lot of leeway in how they essentially implement their Christian or theological beliefs into their company. But I mean, Tony, do you see the possibility that maybe just this degree of freedom might at some point wither away so that it's actually very hard to apply your Christian convictions as a business owner?
So I think the answer to that question is sort of nuanced. As you said, the law of the land, so to speak, right now is for these private, closely held companies the right of owner's conscience is baked into the law, right?
Yeah.
Right? But the question becomes, if ownership goes beyond these private, closely held companies, what then? And I think to a certain extent we haven't seen that in the law yet, and so you'll see legal rulings down the line that'll address this. But on the other side, owners are not without options. So we've seen recently sort of in a new type of corporate form that's come into being in the US that might provide religious family-owned companies an alternative. This type of corporate form is called a benefit corporation. About 33 states have them now. And the way this benefit corporation works is, instead of the typical profit maximization objective that is baked into corporate law, it allows for the owners of the company to actually instill values and a mission into the corporate charter and bylaws.
So this is a specific legal provision for essentially structuring your company in such a way precisely to do the kinds of things that deeply religious Catholics and evangelicals, for instance, might want to do with a company. This is it sounds to me like a good example, an example of positive regulation in some ways, or at least sort of corporate law, to carve out a space for people that actually want to do that from the beginning. Is that what you're describing?
Yes, it gives owners a greater amount of freedom to define what it is they want their company to do, how they contribute to society, right? And it's not necessarily specific to religious values. So there's benefit corporations where people serve charities. There's benefit corporations with environmental ends. But it has been used to good effect by corporations that want to make sure that they maintain their religious character. I can think of the example of Dignity Health in California. It used to be a healthcare provider owned by the Catholic Church, and they wanted a corporate form that allowed them a little more flexibility, but they wanted to maintain their ability to guide the business in accordance to their Catholic values. And so they formed a B Corp, benefit corporation, and they instantiated a value statement as part of their bylaws. And they talk specifically about the dignity of the human person is going to guide healthcare decisions that they make. They talk specifically about the preferential option for the poor to make sure that people have access. And this is part of the company.
So the language drawn directly from Catholic social teaching sort of baked into the pie from the very beginning. I mean, this is we are always hearing stories about private companies and Christian people in business having their religious freedom infringed. This is a kind of a positive story that I think not a lot of people know about. Max, I want to ask you what's probably a controversial question, but a lot of people have the idea that Americans, to succeed in business, actually have to be greedy. That's sort of rule number one. If you want to have a successful business, be greedy. What I'm wondering is if the opposite might be true. Could it be that if you are a business owner or a CEO and you apply Christian ethics, Catholic social teaching in the marketplace into your business, that it might actually make your business not just a more pleasant place to work, but actually a better business?
I think business is an essentially other-oriented occupation, and this is part of what the church tries to tell us in Catholic social doctrine, that it begins with, there's a customer that needs something out there, and you're going to provide it. And of course, we can try to tickle the customer to get the customer to want things that are not necessarily good. We call that consumerism, and the church has a lot to say about consumerism. It doesn't approve, and it counsels us not to engage in that. But people do need things, and that's what business is there to do, is to provide the goods and services that are truly good and that truly serve, that people truly need. And looking at it that way, I don't see any argument for I'm going to be rapacious and greedy. Now, we all know that rapacious and greedy people can succeed in the world, and murderers and thieves and everyone can succeed in the world. But that's not a sustainable game plan.
No, that might work. I mean, especially these days, in this day and age in which you can just get one bad review on Yelp and you're destroyed, right?
That's
so,
right.
I mean, I think that's the sort of beauty, is that a lot of people, especially a lot of Catholics, that think, well, I want to go into business because it might taint me or something. But in fact, if you're really doing business right, you're actually serving people in a different way than you'd be serving them in charity.
It's totally the contrary. It's not just won't taint you. It is the playing field on which or in which you will discover yourself and grow as a person and reach the conditions of your fruition, of your fulfillment. Everybody should be involved with business to the extent they want to be.
Good stuff. Thanks for joining us, gents.
Thank you.
All right. As a writer on Christianity and economics, I've been asked dozens of times, wasn't the early church communist? How would you answer that? Was the early church communist? It's not a crazy question. In the book of Acts, members of the new church sold their belongings and shared their wealth. That sounds like communism to some folks. Not quite. First, let's define communism. Communism is based on Karl Marx's theory of class warfare. Under capitalism, Marx predicted, the workers are exploited. At some point, they revolt against the capitalists, the owners of the means of production. The workers take control of private property by force, and then the state owns it on behalf of the people. There's none of this class warfare stuff in the book of Acts. No attacks on private property, no violent revolution. These new Christians freely sold their possessions and shared. Second, the state was nowhere in sight. No Roman centurions kicked down doors and confiscated property. No one was forced to do anything. It's easy to lose sight of this later in the text, though, when St. Peter condemns Ananias and Sapphira. They're the ones who kept back some of the money they got from selling their land. They were struck dead as a result. But here's what Peter says. Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back part of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not at your disposal? How is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You've not lied to men, but to God. So Peter condemns the couple not for keeping part of the proceeds of the sale, but for lying about it. In fact, he takes for granted that the property was theirs even after it was sold. Third, the communal life of the early church in Jerusalem was never the norm for all Christians. In fact, Luke, the author of Acts, doesn't treat it as the norm even for the Jerusalem church. Luke is describing a unique moment in the life of the early church. Jews had come from around the Roman world to worship at the temple during Pentecost. They were away from their homes and their jobs. Then thousands of them became Christians all at once. What to do? They would have had to return home alone and untaught, if not for the extreme measures taken by the local Christians. The locals chose to sell their stuff and share with their new brothers and sisters. For all we know, the selling and sharing stage lasted 6 months. It's unlikely that all these new Christians stayed in Jerusalem for the rest of their lives. Many surely returned home at some point and brought the gospel with them. The book of Acts does not describe an early communist experiment, but it does give us a strong example. In a pinch, we should be willing to go to great lengths, even to sell all we have, to care for the needy believers and to see the gospel spread to the ends of the earth. That's it for today. I hope today's show has helped you notice how your work can be a force for good in the world. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jay Richards. See you next time.